What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast as part of the Man Cave Podcast that is brought to you by Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Dan here with you as always. Don't forget to follow both podcasts. If you do follow the Man Cave Podcast, well, you'll be able to get all of our Tailgate Series episodes. Packers, Bucks, Brewers, and the outdoors. I'm going to play a little game with free agency starting in the beginning part of next week for the NFL, for every, I was going to say for the Packers, but it's for every team out there. So think again, we're all hoping, some even expecting, the Green and Gold to do something in free agency. Now, I did not include anybody like a DK Metcalf or a Trey Hendrickson, since they're not free agents. You'd have to trade for them. So this is just a free agency game, if you will. Okay, anybody who's available to sign a free agent contract. No trade players involved in this one. So no DK, no Trey Hendrickson, et cetera, et cetera. I'm giving you 5 options, 5 packages. Each option has a defensive lineman or a defensive end, a corner, and a wide receiver. You pick which one you would rather have. Okay? Here are the options again. Option 1, defensive lineman Milton Williams. A lot of people, I mean, even Greg Rosenthal has him as his updated number 1 free agent option on the market. Byron Murphy, corner from Minnesota. Hollywood Brown, wide receiver, spent this past year with the Chiefs. Option 2, Khalil Mack, Asante Samuel Jr., Amari Cooper. Option 3, Joey Bosa, Carlton Davis, the corner from Detroit, Chris Godwin, wide receiver, Tampa. Option 4, Deo, defensive lineman from the Colts. Ward, corner from the 49ers. Devontae, you know him. Option 5, Chase Young, DJ Reed, Stephon Diggs. Which option would you rather have? You can't sub in players or anything like that. Okay? It's just for a little fun here. Which option would you go with? Let's kind of break down these options here. So, option 1, Milton Williams, Philadelphia Eagles. Okay? I mentioned Greg Rosenthal from NFL.com. He does his top 101 free agents. And we talked about it a little bit earlier in the week and such, and went through some of his rankings. And they've been adjusted with who's, new players hitting the free agent market. A few days ago when we talked about it, Devontae wasn't on there, and now he is. So he's up there fairly high. But T. Higgins was number 1. T. Higgins isn't a free agent anymore because he's got the franchise tag. So he's got Milton Williams as his number 1 available free agent. Okay? Dude made himself a lot of money this year, especially when it came to the postseason and NFC Championship game and Super Bowl for his play. We know Green Bay has to upgrade their defensive line, has to upgrade their pass rush. I think the question is, does Green Bay view that they need to improve their interior defensive line play, or is it the defensive ends that they feel like they need more production from? That, to me, we don't know exactly what Goody in the front office is thinking. Do they feel like they are more confident or comfortable with Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt in the middle, or are they more confident, comfortable with Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness on the outside? I think a lot of us fans probably know which one we're more comfortable in, but how Green Bay and how Goody views it might be a little bit different. But Milton Williams is going to cash in. He's going to get a big contract, huge contract. It's going to cost a little bit to get him. Then you got Byron Murphy, the corner from Minnesota, on this list. Still just 27 years old. A couple years ago, he signed a 2-year, $22 million deal with the Vikings. He's a Pro Bowler. Can play a little inside, outside. You got Hollywood Brown, former first-round pick, Cardinals. Was it Cardinals? think it was then he went to the Ravens and then the Chiefs, or was it vice versa? Anyways, he's on his third team right now. He's got speed, or he did have speed, but he's been dealing with some injuries, missed some time this year. Not the most consistent pass catcher. So could Green Bay maybe look at this like, okay, we're spending some money on Milton Williams, spending a little bit on Byron Murphy. We need a wide receiver. Maybe we can get a one-year deal with a guy like Hollywood Brown, who's still in his 20s, the age 28. That's option one. Option two, Khalil Mack. We'll start there with Khalil Mack. He's up there in age. We know that, 34 years old. However, Green Bay has brought in a 34-year-old edge rusher in the past, Julius Peppers. And you look at Khalil Mack, and he's available. I thought it was interesting to note that Greg Rosenthal said that he's a dude who can still disrupt the pocket and stop the run. However, don't ask him to play every down. So I thought that was an interesting note from Greg Rosenthal in his write-up about Khalil Mack. Don't ask him to play every down. Is that kind of a big deal for you? Or maybe you're like, okay, well, that fits Green Bay because obviously they want to do a rotation on the defensive line. So you rotate him in. And we know Green Bay was interested in Khalil Mack before he was traded to the Bears. Those years ago when Goody first started as general manager. But will age be a deterrent for this Packers team? Asante Samuel Jr., corner. Again, former teammate over there with the Chargers, right? Now, he's a guy that initially, I think when the season was over with, he was a guy that a lot of he's a trendy name for Packers fans out there to be like, oh yeah, let's add him, let's bring him in for a corner. And the thing is with him, he's not the greatest tackler. He's not great at press coverage. That's what some of the scouting reports out there say. But he is a playmaker. And he's only 25. And if you could put him in the right situation, the right system, he could be a pretty good baller. But if Jeff Hafley wants to play press coverage like he says, is Asante Samuel a fit within that? That's the question mark. Can Hafley tap into something with Asante Samuel that maybe wasn't at a consistent level during his time with the Chargers? Then you got Amari Cooper, part of this group. Amari Cooper got traded to the Buffalo Bills this past season. And when you look at Cooper, I mean, he was drafted in 2015. So, I mean, a little bit of an older wide receiver there. And when you look at what he did this past season overall, 4 touchdown catches, 547 receiving yards. Postseason, though, he just had 8 targets, 6 catches for 41 yards. So, I mean, the production probably wasn't at the level that I think maybe Buffalo was hoping or expecting for when they acquired Amari Cooper. So, again, maybe with his age, maybe with, where he's at in his career, could you get him a little bit cheaper if you're spending more on a guy like Samuel and maybe a little bit more for a guy like Khalil Mack? Possibly. But you're providing, if Green Bay wants that veteran wide receiver, Amari Cooper checks that box, right? I mean, he is the veteran receiver that you could bring in and maybe kind of help play that mentor role for this young group. And maybe you could get him a little bit cheaper. Compared to some of these. Although and again, I don't know what Amari's goal is at this point, but maybe he's at that point too. Like, okay, payday's maybe long gone at this point, but I want to be on a championship team. And to be fair, he was going through some injuries last year that probably took a dip in his production with the Buffalo Bills. So maybe you could try to get one more big season out of him for this upcoming year. So that's option 2. Option 3, Joey Bosa. So Joey Bosa, a lot of Chargers on this list. And the Chargers have a ton of cap space this year. I think they're top 3. But Joey Bosa is a guy the last couple, last year he played in 14 games, technically started 9, but he played in 14 games. The years before that, 2 years before that, he only played 14 games combined. So the big question is going to be, can he stay healthy? And he is 30. Maybe he's best suited at this point in time of his career as a situational pass rusher. I think a lot is going to depend on what's that money, what's that number going to be for Joey Bosa. That and how comfortable are you with his health, with his injury history the last couple of years. But when he's healthy and when he's on that field, he's been pretty productive. But if you get him, maybe it's a little bit cheaper than a guy like Milton Williams. Maybe it's a little bit cheaper than his teammate Khalil Mack. And then you can get some money for perhaps the top corner on the market, especially when it comes to press coverage, and that's Carlton Davis. Carlton Davis, who excels at man-to-man coverage. If you remember, spent some time with Tampa at the beginning of his career, was with Detroit this past year. He's got that prototypical size you like in a corner, 6'1", a little over 200 pounds. So could that, if you go with the Joey Bosa route, you got a guy maybe that's part of a rotation on the edge, but you get a little bit more moolah for a guy like Carlton Davis, and then boom, you've got your number one corner, a guy who excels at press man coverage, man-to-man coverage. It's like beautiful. And then you add in a wide receiver to that, Chris Godwin, who we know has put up some points, right? He's put up some numbers, but he's coming off of an ACL injury. Are you concerned about that? No question, though. Or he's coming off a dislocated ankle, because after he had a torn ACL too. So, he's gone through a couple of different injuries the last couple of years. On one hand, he suffered that injury earlier on in the season. So you're hoping at this point he's going to be ready to go. And he's still Chris Godwin Jr., who still puts up a bunch of numbers. So, when you're looking at it, it's like, okay, Chris Godwin, I can get him, and I can get Carlton Davis, and then I can get Joey Bosa. Maybe I put Joey Bosa part of a rotation to keep him a little bit more healthier. All right. Intriguing option. Option 4, Deo. He's not the most popular name out there when it comes to defensive linemen, but he is a guy that if you kind of do a little bit more research, he's a guy that a lot of at least the NFL insiders out there feel like he could be that guy that cashes in free agency. There's a lot of big names out there that we've thrown out there. But Dale, he's 25. Was with the Colts this past year, had 50 quarterback pressures, one of 6 players with 30-plus quarterback hits and fewer than 20 starts over the last 2 seasons. Packers may be looking at this like 25. We're going to bet on the upside on this kid, and we're going to have him for a few more years. Is that the route they go? So he may not be the name that you recognize with like a Khalil Mack and the Joey Bosas and such, or the Chase Youngs. But the age and the upside and the arrow trending upward may be where Green Bay goes. And then you pair him with Ward, the corner coming out of the 49ers. He's looking for a fresh start. He's 29 years old. He had that awful tragedy last year, the death of his daughter. And he wants a fresh start away from California. And he was one of the better quarterbacks in football until this past year. And that's with the tragic death of his daughter. 49ers connection. System. You look at, that he started off actually with the Kansas City Chiefs for the first few years. Last 3 years he spent with the 49ers. But you look at systems like, okay, maybe a nice fit for Jeff Hafley. And then, I mean, I don't have to really kind of deep dive into the wide receiver option as Davante. So, I mean, going with perhaps a young ascending pass rusher in Deo, a little bit of risk because maybe it's not a big sample size there. Ward, 29, looking for a fresh start. And then Davante at the back end of his career. All right, option 4. And then option 5, I mentioned Chase Young. Chase Young's out there, former top pick with Washington. Injuries kind of maybe took a hit to the early part of his career. Spent a hot minute with the 49ers, was with the Saints this past year. Still fairly young. Maybe you can get him for another 1-year deal, 2-year deal. He reminds me of like the Jadeveon Clowney, right? Jadeveon Clowney, again, a top pick, but then kind of just going on 1 or 2-year deals in the middle part of his career. And last year with the Saints, you look at the numbers and stat-wise, like, oh, he didn't really, stack up a whole lot in the box scores and that, but he still provided a decent amount of pressures. And I know that's not everybody's favorite word out there when it comes to pass rushers, because then you're like, well, turn those pressures into sacks. And yeah, you'd be right at that too. But would you be intrigued with maybe bringing in a guy like Chase Young? And, I mean, he's still 26. Do you sign him for like a 2-year deal and put him apart with, or pair him up with Rashawn Gary and part with that rotation? And then maybe you have a little bit more money for a corner like DJ Reed. He's a smaller corner. He's up there in age. Halfley's familiar with him. He was his position coach with the 49ers. You can put him in that nickel, but he can play on the outside. He is a very solid number 2 type of corner. Well, at least was number 2 the last couple of years with Sauce Gardner there with the Jets. And then your wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, bringing in a veteran, coming off of an ACL, though. I think it's, if Jair was still on the team, that would be a little interesting since those two always go at it. But I think it's safe to assume Jair is not going to be on the team this year. So, maybe otherwise that would provide for some interesting drama. Those are your options. Option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which one are you going with? So I randomly put these together. I didn't have any, motives, ulterior motives or anything like that. But if I had, I just randomly put them together. If I made my pick on this, I think I would go with option 4. That's with Deo, Ward, and Adams. Deo, you're probably signing for a long-term deal, which and it gives me a little bit of pause because if you sign him to a long-term deal, as on that, what is, Goody sings the praises of Lucas Van Ness and Rashawn Gary, and Rashawn Gary, they locked up and such, but, does that say, all right, yeah, we don't have a whole lot of confidence actually in these guys, even though I'll say it in the media. I pause a little bit whether they're going to give a big contract to a younger guy, but I'd be okay with it for Deo. Ward, you can probably get for a couple years. I know he's 29, but you bring him in. Maybe you still bring in a corner through the draft, and then Davante for the next couple years here too. If I had to pick one, I'm probably going option 4. I don't, when I look at the options here for the other ones, option 1 that had Milton and Murphy and Hollywood Brown, I'm not big on Hollywood Brown. I'd be good with the other 2. Option 2 with Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper and Asante Samuel Jr., I'm not big on Asante Samuel Jr., especially if Green Bay wants to play that press coverage, man coverage. He's not the greatest at that. That kind of takes a little bit of a hit for me. Option 3, I'm not the biggest on Joey Bosa, but that would probably be my close second because I'm very intrigued with Carlton Davis and Chris Godwin coming over. If you can get Bosa with Davis and Godwin, option 3 is so close. I mean, it's neck and neck for me. And then option 5, Young, DJ Reed, Stephon Diggs. I don't know if I want Stephon Diggs in my locker room. I don't know if I want that. So that kind of threw that one out the window for me. So for me, it's between 3 and 4. 4 with a slight edge over option 3. But I'd be happy with either one of those. That's just my opinion.